Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're talking about, well, I guess you could say a secret weapon for success. And it's not about those fancy degrees or
Yep.
technical skills that everybody's always talking about today.
Yeah.
It's all about mastering the art of human relations.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
So think of this as your cheat sheet
Yeah.
for navigating like the world of people, whether you're at work, at home, or anywhere in between.
Sounds good.
And the best part
Yeah.
is that we're drawing all this wisdom from a true classic, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Ah,
Have you heard of this one?
of course, a classic.
This book has been a bestseller for decades.
Mhm.
And that's because it's packed with these timeless techniques
Mhm.
born out of Carnegie's own real-life experiences.
You know what's so interesting about this book to me? It tackles a skill that's surprisingly absent from most formal education. Like you rarely find college courses dedicated to understanding people, building relationships, and effectively influencing others.
Right. Oh, totally. It's like we're expected to just figure it out on our own.
Right, exactly.
A major study by the University of Chicago and the YMCA, this was a really interesting study. They actually found that human relations was like the second most popular topic.
Yeah.
That adults were
Mhm.
eager to learn about, right after health.
Oh, wow.
So they spent 2 years and a hefty sum.
Yeah.
Back then it was $25,000 interviewing people just to figure out
Yeah.
what they craved to learn.
Yeah, basically, everyone's interested in this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So chances are you're in the same boat. You wanted the secrets to better connections and influence.
Yep.
And that's precisely what Carnegie's book offers.
That's right.
It's a practical hands-on guide
It is.
filled with techniques that anyone can use
Yeah.
immediately.
Right.
And what's even more remarkable is that Carnegie didn't just invent these principles. He developed them by observing what worked in his own human relations courses.
Hmm.
So he saw firsthand how these techniques
Hmm.
transform people's lives.
So he essentially built a human interaction lab. Not just theory, but like
All right.
tried and tested wisdom.
Oh, yeah. So tell me about some of the success stories
Mm.
that came out of this lab. I'm curious to see how these techniques actually played out in the real world.
Okay, so there's one story that really highlights the transformative power of Carnegie's approach. It involves an employer who had 314 employees. And let's just say his workplace was far from harmonious. It was a breeding ground for negativity and conflict,
Oh, no.
which, as you can imagine, took a toll on both morale and productivity.
Okay, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. What happened?
Right. He stumbled upon Carnegie's principles
Uh,
and decided to give them a shot. And what's remarkable is that he didn't implement some grand sweeping changes. He simply shifted his focus from criticism to appreciation. Instead of constantly finding fault with his employees, he started acknowledging their efforts and expressing genuine gratitude.
So a simple change in attitude
Right.
led to a massive shift in the entire work environment.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's incredible. The workplace transformed from a battleground into a space of collaboration and mutual respect.
Yeah.
And this shift not only boosted employee morale, but also led to a significant increase in productivity.
That's amazing.
It's a classic example
Mhm.
of how a seemingly small adjustment based on genuine appreciation can have a ripple effect
Right.
throughout an entire organization.
That's an incredible story. It really shows how powerful these
Right.
principles can be. But that's just one example, right? I'm sure there are countless others.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Carnegie's book is filled with anecdotes of people who achieved remarkable results using these techniques. We're talking salespeople closing previously impossible deals, executives saving their careers from disaster, and even an art dealer who was so moved by the book that he couldn't sleep for days.
Wow. Okay, so we've established this book is the real deal. But enough teasing. Let's get to the heart of it. What are some of the specific techniques
Yeah.
that Carnegie lays out? How can our listeners start using them today to improve their own interactions?
Okay, so one of the most fundamental principles, and perhaps the most overlooked, is cultivating a genuine interest in others. This goes beyond just being polite. It's about actively seeking to understand other people's perspectives, their motivations, their dreams.
Sounds simple enough.
Mm-hmm.
But in a world that's obsessed with self-promotion
Yeah.
and instant gratification, actually listening to and valuing others
Yeah.
can feel like a lost art.
So do you have any tips on how we can develop this genuine interest?
Carnegie highlights a fascinating story about Edward Bach,
Hmm.
who rose from a humble office to become a prominent magazine editor.
Okay.
His secret was that he was genuinely curious about successful people's journeys. He'd write to them, asking about their childhoods, showing a sincere interest in their paths to success.
So instead of focusing on what he could get from these people, he focused on understanding them as individuals.
Right.
That's interesting. And it's not just about connecting with high achievers. Even royalty understood this principle. Both the Duke of Windsor and King George V emphasized the importance of taking a genuine interest in others, regardless of their social standing.
It's about recognizing the inherent worth in every individual.
Oh,
It
exactly.
reminds me of that story in the book about the bank depositor who felt so connected to the tellers at her bank simply because they asked about her hospitalized mother and genuinely cared about her well-being.
Yeah. Those little things matter.
They do.
It's these small acts of kindness and genuine interest that create lasting connections.
So we've got genuine interest as a foundation. What else is in Carnegie's arsenal of relationship building techniques?
Well, another key principle is giving honest and sincere appreciation.
Okay.
Now, this is not about flattery, which is often insincere and can backfire. It's about recognizing and acknowledging the good in others in a genuine and specific way.
That makes sense. It's one thing to say you're great. It's another to say, I really appreciated how you handled that difficult client. Your patience and problem-solving skills were impressive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Charles Schwab, a titan of the steel industry, firmly believed in this principle. He was known for praising generously and criticizing sparingly.
Yeah.
He understood that people thrive on
yeah.
encouragement and recognition.
Like that saying, people may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
And don't forget the incredible story of Stevie Wonder. His teacher saw his potential, appreciated his gift of hearing,
Yeah.
and nurtured it. Who knows if he would have become the legend he is without that early support and recognition.
It's true.
It's a powerful reminder that recognizing and appreciating someone's strengths can have a profound impact on their life. So we've got genuine interest, sincere appreciation.
Right.
What's next on this roadmap to better relationships?
Okay, well, Carnegie suggests learning to talk in terms of what the other person wants. This might sound manipulative at first, but it's really about understanding their motivations and aligning your message with their desires.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Can you give me an example of how this works in practice?
Think about it like fishing. You can't just use any bait you like. You need to use something that appeals to the specific fish you're trying to catch.
Yeah.
Similarly, when you're communicating with someone, you need to understand what they're hungry for, what are their goals, their values, their dreams.
That's a great analogy. And Carnegie actually uses a fishing example himself. He talks about Lloyd George, a British prime minister who attributed his success to understanding this very principle. He said, it was necessary to bait the hook to suit the fish.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great anecdote about Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, that illustrates this point. His nephews weren't writing home to their mother, who was worried sick.
Yeah.
Carnegie made a bet he could get them to write back without even asking directly.
Oh, wow.
How did he manage that?
I don't.
Well, he wrote them a casual letter,
Yeah.
mentioning in a postscript that he was sending each of them a $5 bill. Oh, there.
Oh.
He forgot to enclose the money.
He's sneaky.
Right.
I like it.
And I bet it works like a charm.
Oh, I bet it did.
Of course.
Yeah.
The nephews wrote back immediately. It's a playful example, but it shows how understanding someone's motivation, in this case, their desire for little financial reward, can be incredibly effective.
Yeah.
And it's not just about money. It's about understanding what drives people, what makes them tick.
Totally.
There's also that story about Stan Novak and his son, who was starting kindergarten. Instead of forcing or lecturing him, Stan tapped into his son's desire to be a big boy and framed school as a step towards that goal.
Yeah, that's a good one.
This is better framing things in a way
Yeah.
that resonates with the other person's wants and needs. This applies to everything, from parenting to business negotiations. When you can tap into what someone truly desires, you create a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all fits together. We're building a foundation of genuine interest and sincere appreciation, and they were learning to communicate in a way that aligns with the other person's wants. What else does Carnegie recommend?
Well, let's see. There's a lot more. But maybe we should save that
Okay.
for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. We'll be back soon with more insights from how to win friends and influence people.
Sounds great.
So far, we've uncovered some pretty powerful techniques like genuine interest, sincere appreciation, and speaking to the other person's wants. Like we're building this toolkit for better relationship. But what about those times when communication gets a little tricky? What about disagreements and criticism?
You've hit on a crucial point. Those are inevitable parts of life. And Carnegie dedicates a significant portion of his book to navigating those choppier waters. His advice might surprise you, but it's incredibly effective.
All right. I'm all ears. So how do we handle those moments when we're ready to like dig in our heels and shout, you were wrong from the rooftops?
Well, Carnegie's first piece of advice is surprisingly simple. Avoid arguments.
Really?
Yeah. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, especially when we feel strongly about something. But think about it. Have you ever won an argument and felt truly good about it?
Not really.
Or has it left you feeling drained and the relationship strained?
Yeah. It's like that old saying, you can win the argument but lose the relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Carnegie illustrates this point with several historical anecdotes, including one about William J., who tragically died in a carriage accident, while stubbornly refusing to yield the right of way.
Oh, wow.
It highlights how holding on to our need to be right can have these unintended and even devastating consequences.
That's a sobering reminder that sometimes letting go of the need to win is actually a victory in itself.
It is.
So even when disagreements arise, shifting the focus can make a world of difference. Carnegie tells a story about a consultant who's facing this like $9,000 tax bill dispute with a rather hostile tax inspector. Instead of arguing facts and figures, the consultant decided to acknowledge the inspector's expertise and express appreciation for his knowledge.
So what happened? Did the inspector suddenly become a teddy bear?
Well, not quite a teddy bear, but his demeanor softened significantly. He was clearly disarmed by the genuine appreciation, and the conversation became much more productive.
That's interesting.
This highlights a key takeaway. Acknowledging the other person's feelings and perspective, even in a seemingly logical situation, can completely change the dynamic.
It's like you're disarming them with respect and making them feel heard.
Right.
And that opens the door for genuine dialogue.
Exactly.
It goes back to that fundamental human need for validation.
And that leads us to one of Carnegie's most powerful, yet often overlooked pieces of advice. Admit your wrongs quickly and emphatically.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Okay, now that one's a little harder to swallow. Admitting I'm wrong, emphatically. It goes against every instinct in my body. But I'm willing to hear you out. Why is this so important?
Well, think about it. When someone challenges your viewpoint, do you immediately acknowledge that you might be mistaken?
Probably not.
Or do you feel that urge to defend your position, even if deep down you have like a sliver of doubt?
All right, you got me there. I'm definitely guilty of digging in my heels when my ego feels threatened.
It's natural.
Yeah.
But Carnegie argues that this defensiveness is counterproductive. It creates a wall between us and others. It shuts down the possibility of learning and growth.
So admitting we're wrong actually opens up more possibilities.
Exactly.
Right.
It disarms the other person, fosters trust, and creates a space for genuine understanding. Carnegie shares a touching story about a Chinese father who is estranged from his son due to a long-standing disagreement.
Right.
The father eventually swallowed his pride, admitted his wrongdoing, and reconciled with his son.
Wow. That takes immense courage, especially considering cultural norms.
It does.
Yeah.
But the reward was a restored relationship. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes admitting our faults is the bravest and most loving thing we can do.
Okay, I'm starting to see the wisdom in that.
Mm.
But what about criticism? It's often necessary, especially in professional settings. How do we deliver feedback in a way that helps people improve without crushing their spirit?
Carnegie has some excellent advice for this as well.
Okay.
He stresses the importance of beginning with praise and honest appreciation, even when delivering criticism.
You've probably heard of the sandwich technique,
Oh, yeah.
where you sandwich the criticism between two positive points.
Right.
But doesn't that sometimes feel a bit forced and insincere?
It can. It's not done genuinely. The key is to focus on specific examples of good work or positive qualities, rather than offering generic compliments.
So instead of saying, you're doing great, you might say, I was really impressed with how you handled that presentation. Your slides were clear and concise, and you did a great job engaging the audience.
Exactly. Carnegie illustrates this principle with stories of historical figures who mastered this approach. There's Coolidge's secretary, who received a rather awkward yet effective blend of praise and criticism regarding her punctuation skills.
Interesting.
And there's McKinley, who managed to gently steer a campaign speechwriter in different direction without deflating his enthusiasm.
And even Lincoln, known for his eloquence and tact, understood this principle. His famous letter to General Hooker, which later sold for a fortune at auction, started with praise and encouragement before addressing Hooker's shortcomings. It's fascinating to see how this technique has been used throughout history by some of the most influential figures. But what about those times when we need to address a problem without directly criticizing someone? Is there a way to do that without being passive-aggressive?
Carnegie suggests calling attention to mistakes indirectly, rather than pointing them out in a confrontational way. He offers several compelling examples of this in action. There's Charles Schwab, who subtly addressed an employee's smoking habit by offering cigars to be enjoyed outside the designated area.
I see. It's about leading by example and creating a context where the desired behavior becomes a natural choice.
Precisely.
There's also the story of John Wanamaker, a successful department store owner who observed a customer being ignored by his employees. Instead of reprimanding them, he simply stepped in and assisted the customer himself, silently demonstrating the behavior he expected.
It's a powerful example of leadership in action.
It's not about barking orders. It's about setting the standard and inspiring others to follow suit.
Right.
These stories highlight how subtle cues and positive reinforcement can be far more effective than direct criticism. It's about creating an environment where people feel valued and respected, even when they make mistakes.
That's right.
So instead of tearing people down, we're building them up and guiding them toward better choices. It's a much more positive and empowering approach.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about avoiding arguments, admitting our faults, and delivering criticism constructively. But is there anything about actually motivating people to take action? I mean, influence is in the title of the book, after all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of what we've discussed focuses on building those strong relationships and fostering, a positive communication style. But Carnegie doesn't stop there. He provides several techniques specifically designed to inspire action and change.
Okay.
One that stands out is dramatizing your ideas.
That makes sense. You've got to grab people's attention.
Right.
But how does that work in real life?
Well, Carnegie tells a story about a safety engineer who was struggling to get workers to understand the danger of hot motors. Instead of just lecturing them about safety procedures, he decided to make them feel the heat.
Ooh, I bet that got their attention. It's one thing to hear about a danger. It's another to experience it firsthand. Exactly. It made the abstract concept of danger concrete and visceral, leading to a much more profound impact. Another technique Carnegie highlights is throwing down a challenge.
Appealing to that competitive spirit. I'm guessing this works especially well with ambitious types.
You're on the right track. Carnegie uses the example of a young boy who was struggling in school. His teacher, instead of scolding him, challenged him to live up to his potential.
Okay.
This sparked a fire in the boy, and he ended up becoming a top student.
It's amazing how a simple shift in perspective, from criticism to challenge, can completely change someone's trajectory. It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation.
Precisely.
Okay.
And Carnegie doesn't stop there. He offers another intriguing technique, giving the other person a fine reputation to live up to.
Now that sounds almost like reverse psychology. Tell me more about how this works.
It's about expressing your belief in someone's potential, even if they haven't fully realized it yet. By recognizing and acknowledging their positive qualities, you create a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, encouraging them to strive towards the image you've presented.
It's like planting a seed of possibility.
Yeah.
And then nurturing it to fruition.
Exactly. Carnegie provides a few compelling examples. There's the restaurant manager who noticed a waiter struggling. Instead of reprimanding him, he gave him the responsibility of training a new employee, essentially putting him in a leadership position.
What a brilliant way to boost his confidence. It's like saying, I believe in you. You have what it takes to lead.
And it worked. The waiter rose to the challenge and became a much more valuable asset to the restaurant. Then there's the story of the dentist, who always kept his office impeccably clean. It wasn't just about hygiene. It was about setting a standard of excellence that instilled trust in his patients.
It's about creating an environment that reflects the values you want to embody.
Precisely. And let's not forget about those who might need a little extra encouragement. Carnegie emphasizes the importance of making the fault seem easy to correct.
I imagine this is where empathy plays a crucial role.
Absolutely. Carnegie shares the story of a young man struggling to quit smoking.
Okay.
Instead of judging or lecturing him, the speaker simply shared his own struggles with the habit, making the young man feel understood and less alone.
Sometimes just knowing that someone else has faced similar challenges can make all the difference.
It normalizes the struggle and
Yeah.
makes success seem more attainable.
Right.
And finally, Carnegie offers a technique that beautifully ties everything together. Make the other person happy about doing what you suggest.
Okay. That sounds like the holy grail of influence. How do we achieve this without resorting to manipulation?
It's not about trickery, it's about aligning your suggestions with the other person's wants and needs, making them feel like they're not just following orders, actively participating in a mutually beneficial outcome.
So collaboration rather than coercion.
Exactly. Carnegie revisits the story of Colonel House and President Wilson. House was a master at subtly influencing Wilson by planting ideas in a way that allowed Wilson to feel like he'd come up with them himself.
It's brilliant, really. It's about respecting the other person's intelligence and autonomy.
Yeah.
Making them feel like they're in the driver's seat.
Right. There's also a heartwarming story about a father who was struggling to get his son to help with the pear harvest.
Okay.
Instead of demanding or bribing him, he turned it into a game. He offered a reward for each basket collected and jokingly deducted money for any pears left behind.
What a clever approach.
Mm.
It transformed a chore
And
into a fun and engaging challenge.
it highlights the power of creativity and playfulness in motivating others.
And finally,
Carnegie tells a story about a store manager who transformed a careless employee into a star performer simply by giving her a new title, Supervisor of Price Tag Posting.
wait, that's it. Just a change in title.
It might seem insignificant, but it gave the employee a sense of ownership and responsibility, making her feel proud of her work. It speaks to that fundamental human desire for recognition and significance.
It's incredible how these seemingly small gestures can have such a profound impact. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. It's like Carnegie has given us a whole new lens through which to view human interactions.
It's important to remember that these techniques are most effective when they're applied with sincerity and a genuine desire to connect with others. They're not about manipulating people. They're about understanding them, respecting them, and inspiring them to be their best selves.
And as Carnegie reminds us, there's untapped potential within each of us. He quotes William James, who said, "Compared with what we ought to be, we are only half awake. We are making use of only a small part of our physical and mental resources."
It's a powerful reminder that we all have the capacity for greatness. And by applying these principles of human relations, we can not only unlock our own potential, but also help others discover theirs.
So what are you waiting for? Go out there and put these techniques into practice. You might be surprised at the transformative results you'll experience in your own life and in the lives of those around you.